Excellent. All right. It's 12:03, so we might just start getting started a little bit. Um, just because that's always a little bit easier. So and we so I might just take this opportunity to welcome everyone as you're still coming in. Um, this is the Learning Design Special Interest Group for Escalate, and just grabbing a couple other things while we're here. So welcome everyone, and I might do bio introductions in a minute, just because I need to. I'm on one screen, and it's very hard to try and get both up at the same time. So apologies. But we are joined by an amazing panel today. We've got Dr. Jason Brown, Rachel Barron, and Heather Pate, who all come from, and apologies, hopefully I've pronounced your names correctly. They will come with a wealth of experience, both working in institutions where they're able to work with work integrated learning and the curriculum and other related employability careers, e-portfolios work that intersects with learning design, as well as both Heather and Rachel come with experience and credentials working with ASIN. So they'll be able to speak to those, which is terrific. So we do have such a wealth of experience in the room, which I'm really excited about. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which we're on, which may be different because we're all coming from different locations. So it's a good chance where if you would like to, feel free to put an acknowledgement in the chat of which country you're joining us from today. I'm on Wurundjeri land, so the Boonwurrung and Woiwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nations in Melbourne, but you may be joining from other locations. And just to note that sovereignty hasn't been ceded. We extend any respect to owners and elders, past, present, and future, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be joining today. If you would like to join the Escalate Special Interest Learning Design Special Interest Group, we often work through LinkedIn, which is, we have the Australian Association of Learning Designers group. Keith is very active in there. So, and I try to be somewhat active. We regularly have webinars monthly, and there's also the Third Space Symposium coming up in early December, and that is a very cheap event to go to. I think it's about $56, $57, something like that. So that is just before Escalate conference. So if you are in the Escalate space, there are some other events happening. There are also other special interest groups that do free events. So just recognizing that there are lots of spaces to get professional development. So we'll introduce our panelists, and I'm just going to grab my questions because we are joined with some terrific people today. And sorry, I'm trying to organize from my phone, because I am on campus today, so I am juggling multiple devices across screens, which is always fun. So apologies if I'm a little bit scattered. I'm just bringing my questions up but I might actually just start by, so I've got time and I'm not wasting everybody else's time. If each of the panel members, and we might start with Rachel just because we've got our Rachel first on the screen here. If you could introduce yourself a little bit and just maybe, mention a little bit about your background and, what you'd be able to talk to today, that would be terrific. So I might ask our three panelists to be able to do that, and I'll start with Rachel. So I'll just pass that over, and then I can start also asking some of the questions that we've got prepared. Thanks, Rachel. Hopefully you're okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Great.
And I
So
might, it's all right if I turn off this screen so that way we can see everybody a little bit more easily. I'll just stop sharing, and that way that might help a bit.
great. Thanks, Kate. And thanks, Leanne, too. I know I know Leanne from a previous life at Deakin, so and now also at La Trobe, a La Trobe person like me. Great. Oh, right, the host is spotlighted. Great. So look, I guess I've been in institutions for about a very long time, and dare I say it's 25 years this year, and I'm not sure how I got there. But certainly, I guess I ground the way, or my approach is very much, I've spent a lot of time working with international students and in student engagement for a long time at Deakin, and then with international education, and then with faculty running a very large peer mentor program. So very much grounding my approach in experiential learning and in a complex world with a cultural lens. I certainly see myself in that third space. Is that the right word? I think I've done a bit of most of my life has actually been a professional staff member, but also much more recently a mix of professional, academic, and then since 2022 been coordinating and teaching into the industry placement minor, a university-wide elective minor, and a suite of subjects that students can do as electives, really. They can use their electives as part of their degree. Is that Kate?
Terrific. Thank you so much, Rachel. And I'll just add Jason. Hopefully if I add spotlight, it adds, oh, there we go. So Jason, would you be able to introduce yourself for us? We've got Dr. Jason Brown, who is aside from a wealth of experience, is also one of my colleagues at Melbourne University. So I get the pleasure of working and sometimes having coffees with him.
Thanks, Kate. Great to be with everyone today. So my background has been in career development for, probably nearly 30 years now. My current role is Academic Program Director for Experiential Learning with the Faculty of Business and Economics at University of Melbourne. And prior to that, I was also at La Trobe with Rachel and Leanne, and I was head of the career service for about 10 years, but also did a bit of work in learning teaching space, and my last few years there was as a lead for employability in the curriculum. So my PhD was looking at graduate employability. My research very much is still focused around those kind of psychological factors that contribute to that, and particularly through learning as well. So starting to do a few projects at the moment around looking at actually the learning that actually happens within work integrated learning experiences. So I'll leave it there for a moment. We've got more to talk about through the whole discussion.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason. And I'll just add Heather in, and I'm lucky to be able to work with Heather in lots of ways, especially in the e-portfolio space. But Heather comes from, similar background to Rachel in some ways. But I'm sure you can talk a little bit more to that because you're both in undertaking work for ASIN, as well as both coming from third space and learning design experience and roles. So Heather, would you be able to introduce yourself for us?
Sure. I work over at Edith Cowan University in Perth. Yes, like Kate said, we know each other through ePortfolios Australia, and same with Leanne. And Kate, and Rachel, we also know through ASIN as well. So I work as a senior learning designer, and I am supporting the schools of medical health science and education. And my area is of interest here today, I think, is in like whole of course design and e-portfolios, and how e-portfolios can be used to support students throughout their whole course. On the ASIN board, I'm the co-chair for the professional learning committee, so we do lots of interesting stuff related to work integrated learning through that. And that's me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And so today we've got a few different questions that we'll ask, but the overarching question that we're really coming together on and that we've posed to the panel is, how can learning designers collaborate with students, educators, and industry to create impactful work integrated learning experiences? So that's a question that I'll pose to you, and that's quite a big one. It's probably more than what we've got time for today, but I guess it would be good to start with just noting some projects that you've worked on that you've been that you're proud of, where you feel like that's I guess you've been able to support that kind of impactful work integrated learning experience in some way, and how, like, what has it been about that experience that has been positive or impactful? So I'm not sure who would like to start with that. Feel free if somebody prefers to start off.
I'll go.
Yeah, go on.
I'll give it a go. And I sort of welcome questions. So I hope, and sometimes, we use a lot of different language. So I hope, please ask me if you're not sure about anything. I guess my passion over the last couple of 2.5 years has been working on the industry placement minor. And I have to say there's been lots of challenges along the way, and there's still a lot. It is a university-wide minor, and we're still I think there's still some challenges to go there, but I think what I would like to say is, if I ask very quickly that broader question, Kate and Leanne, around, how can learning designers be involved more broadly? I was thinking about things like involve stakeholders in decision making. These are probably some principles that I work with. Give lots of options and ideas and flexibility. And these sorts of principles that I'm working with. Be willing to consider multiple perspectives. Give choice to students. That's worked really well, I think, in the industry placement minor, and I'll come back to that in a tick. Be open to dealing with ambiguity and complexity, because I think Heather and Jason, you and others involved here in the room, I'm sure with other people in your institutions, work integrated learning is very, very complex space, and keep that sort of eye on the continuous review and evaluation too, in whatever way or shape or form you can. So keep talking to people and asking questions. That sort of, I call it hot and warm, where you're having a lot of conversations regularly. And I think what I would say probably, so I'm just keep looking at my little notes that I made on the questions. I think probably one of the things that's worked really well in the subjects, I think, is we have a placement learning plan and setting goals. And students can do these throughout the subject. So they have to set goals for each time they do their 100 hours, their block of 100 hours, and then they review. So they do that as a process, a bit like it's authentic, like we all do with our, what would you call it, our performance review process. So they plan, review at each 100 hours, and the process is done together with their supervisor as well. So that to me is one way of, I guess, maintaining some understanding of what's happening in placement, monitoring and supporting students as, through both the assessment and as we go along, and making sure that we're connecting as well. I'm having lots of conversations and emails and regular contact with supervisors as well. I think the other, one more thing, will I mention one more thing and then hand it over? Is that okay? Great. Just tell me if I'm talking too long. I think the other thing I wanted to mention is e-portfolios and, I guess, reflective practice. And I think that's I've tried to, like the goals, I've tried to scaffold this across these 4 subjects. And when I talk about giving choice to students around setting goals and having one goal that I say I want in this space, and then the other 2 that they can set themselves in each subject, and building on that experience from moving from, assessing themselves, evaluating themselves, to how do they work in a team, to how do they work in an organisation, to what's the cumulative experience. And Heather, I use ePortfolio there, but I've got a long way to go to really scaffold it across. But my last point I'd make around scaffolding and giving students options or choice would be when I introduce reflective practice and reflective writing, I give them a model. So I start with the deal model, which maybe most of you would do. And then in professional placement 2, 3, and 4, I give them a choice to use a model and introduce a range of models that I know, because reflection's used across education and health and nursing and a whole range of those allied health disciplines. So I give them some choice. And it's interesting, I think for me, I always see students choosing different models because their brain or it relates and they can relate to it. And that's really what I want them to do, because I want them to use that reflective practice in their day-to-day professional practice. Maybe that will leave it with that. Is that okay?
That's awesome. And there's lots to come back to. I loved the point about choice, especially in relation to things like universal design for learning that might come up as learning designers. So we might have to park that for a minute, because it'd be great to hear from Jason and Heather first around that same question, which I'll just remind you is, how can learning designers collaborate with students, educators and industry to create impactful work integrated learning? So really, I guess at this stage, what are those projects that you've worked on that you feel best encapsulate impactful work integrated learning? And, what does that kind of mean for you in practice? Jason, did you want to?
Absolutely. It's a great question, because I think one of the big issues I see with particularly work-based learning is really that there's not a lot of learning design in it. So we very much hand over a student to an employer and hope that they actually have a decent learning experience there. I think some of the allied health fields are probably a little bit better, because they've got particular competencies they need to develop and demonstrate, so they're a bit more structured there. But certainly the space I'm working in at the moment, particularly in business, there's not a lot of structured internship programs around, and it is very reliant on the skill of the host supervisor to ensure that students actually do learn during that experience. So one of the projects that we've implemented in the Faculty of Business Economics is a program called Work Hub, and that is an on-campus kind of, I guess, simulated internship program. So and hybrid kind of industry projects. So we've got a large office that can accommodate up to 30 students. So we've got boardroom, a couple of meeting rooms, open plan office area with desks for up to 24 students, and a few other kind of activity-based spaces. And students come in and they're working there for 1 day a week for a semester on a project that industry provides to them. So they get given a problem. So it might be a marketing related one or something like that. And then each week they'll actually come in, we meet with them, we'll talk about what they're doing for the day. They'll have a meeting with their industry mentor. So the part of the requirement with the industry partner is they have to provide a mentor for each group of students and to meet with them each week. And then they do other things like occasionally some site visits and other things to get to know the business more. They might be going out to a retail space that the business runs, or maybe even just into their head office. So students work on that each week in small groups. We run a workshop with them as well, kind of developing their workplace and employability skills. And we run those workshops as really using Kolb's experiential learning model. So it's not direct instruction, it's very much facilitator-led, as much as a manager or team leader might do with their team, of actually just going through and introducing some ideas and having discussions, maybe trying out something. For example, might be a discussion around project planning and then getting students to actually start mapping out their project plan, going off and actually developing, then coming back at the end of the day and having a kind of reflective group discussion around how that activity went, what they learnt from that, what changes they might need to do, etc. So really using those four kind of components of the Kolb's model. So what I really like about that program is that it is much more a structured learning experience. We've got, and we also pair that up with the assessment tasks, which might have come from the Latrobe placement minor, which I did have a little bit of involvement in the conceptual design of that one, and I've taken some of those ideas forward in terms of that learning plan as being a really important part for getting students to think about what they want to learn over their placement or their internship, identifying some learning activities that they would actually do that help support those, and then we get them to write reflections about each of those learning activities that they have engaged in over the semester. So that works well for Work Hub, but also works really well for the students doing more of a traditional internship, because it kind of forces the student and the host supervisor to agree on the activities that they're going to do. So it kind of creates a bit of a space for them to actually loosely design the learning experience of those placements. So we certainly see in assessing those reflective writing that it does really focus that much more of a kind of structured approach to those internships. So so that's where I think it's these types of experiences I think are really great spaces for learning designers and educators and industry to come together to design really important experiences for our students.
Thanks so much, Jason. And Heather, I'll pass it to you. Are there particular projects or areas that you feel have worked well, or for work integrated learning and in terms of impact?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Kate. Something that I've been working on is like this from the ePortfolio space is like the whole of course workbook, where students can sort of unpack what it is it's the course learning outcomes that they're working towards to make sense of them. So because in work integrated learning, like the pre, during and after is a really, really big thing. Setting students up before they go on placement is really important. So for the whole of course approach, if you're unpacking your course learning outcomes beforehand, then you can really kind of think about what skills it is that you're really asking students to work towards. And also from a practical perspective, like what does this really look like when you're out in your profession? So because if you don't do that, then the ideas are quite abstract and they don't really necessarily understand what they are. So I think that process of like starting at the very, very beginning, supporting students the whole way through to recognize this is what I'm working towards and this is why I'm working towards it. And this is also my gaps or what I don't know or I need to know more about. And giving them opportunities throughout to work on those, work through those outcomes and give stories, tell stories about what those, about experiences within those skills so that they can sort of show that where they are now and what they still need to work towards. Skills. Another area I work in is with ASIN. I'm on the committee that looks after student scholarships. And in that committee, we have students, what they do is they write a reflection. If you want to go on placement in a regional area, if you're from the city or vice versa, if you're from the regional area and you want to come to the city, then you can apply for this scholarship. So I do recommend that you push that out to your universities as well. And what they need to do is write a reflection to say what it is they want to work on. And what really struck me, so this is from universities all over Australia, what really struck me is a lot of students don't really know how to write a reflection related to their skill development. They get a little bit confused about what skill is. You know, they'll often talk about like their skills, like, you know, cannulation or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't see it like, you know, communication skills or collaboration skills or critical thinking skills. So that's why I think connecting it through the whole way through helps them break that down and helps them make sense of, these are the actual skills I want to work on. It is a really good program though, and what's really nice about it is the mentorship element of that. I think that's what you guys were talking about too. Jason, you're talking about the essay, like working through with students as you go through. And just one other thing I wanted to say, which was that students, when they go on placement, you know, we know it can be an extremely stressful situation for them because they're doing it for the first time. They don't really know what they're walking into. So any opportunities that students, that you have to alleviate that, the better. So for example, if you're using an e-portfolio system or any form of technology, make sure they know it before they go off on placement. So they're not struggling with technology when they're already worried about so many other things. Same with things like reflective tools. So it's really interesting. Rachel gives people like the different choices of what they want to do, and Jason said that that he uses the Kolb system. So I think either way, if students know how to reflect, they have a process that they follow, then they also don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about getting their answers wrong. It's easy for them because they already are experienced in this kind of area, which means they can really focus on just getting the most out of the experience of WELL, rather than worrying about those other things, which really they don't need to worry about in that particular situation or until they get back. That's it for me.
Terrific. And I've tried to encapsulate some of these in the chat. So please feel free to validate those. So hopefully I've caught those, because I know that there's a lot that's just been put in there. So for me, it's always good to have a bit of some takeaways. And I noticed that there's also been a couple of questions in the chat, or at least one. So I might just start off with a slightly different one, which is, and it's anyone who would like to put their hand up to take it, please feel free. But one, I guess, that I thought might be useful as well at this point is really just asking, like, how broad of a church is WIL? What should we be thinking about and encapsulating in terms of the diversity of WIL? Just so that I guess all of us have a better understanding of what we mean by work integrated learning, would be maybe one to ask the group, because it sounds like there's all sorts of different things happening in what you do.
I'm happy to make a comment. Probably when I'm talking to the industry placement minor, I'm talking about the traditional version of WIL, perhaps quite different to what Jason's talking about, and I'll let him add more there. But there is certainly a range of, if we're talking about diversity and what WIL is, I talk about my area as being work-based learning, so more about placements, traditional space. But certainly, what I see happening is a whole range of models developing. And ASEN, Heather, maybe you can talk to that more. ASEN's been involved with colleagues like Leonie Russell from MIT, leading projects around a range of models that exist. And I'm seeing now a lot more models around projects, consultancy, that gives students much more ability to engage in WIL earlier in their degree. Perhaps I'll leave it there and give someone else a chance.
WIL's absolutely a very broad church. I think, within my faculty, we tend to refer to it now more as experiential learning. So we count in that a lot of different tasks. So obviously the work-based learning that we have, but we also do things like case studies, field trips, simulations, role plays, all those kind of activities that can be, a lot of those can be done within class and within tutorials that bring to life some of the learning. In my team, we also do a lot of teaching of business practicum subjects. So we get to take students overseas and working in companies on projects for a few weeks, and we have similar ones domestically as well. and study tours where we actually go out and go and visit companies and learn about what they're doing, and writing up kind of research reports based on what they find. So, and anything that gives students an opportunity to actually either engage in an authentic task, to actually interact with industry, those types of activities are really useful and come under that broader umbrella of WIL.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say the same, Jason, that work integrated learning, the key aspect that holds them all together is that it involves industry. That there's some, when it's marked that there's input from industry into that event or project. So it can happen on campus, but you'll have an industry partner who you're working with, and the students are getting feedback from that person. Yeah, there's a lot of online WIL now as well. There's lots of opportunities that weren't there before, perhaps before COVID weren't there so much, and are increasing, well, since COVID. Yeah, like the international, as Jason also mentioned, there's lots of opportunities these days. And a big difference now is that all courses should be engaging in work integrated learning. Is that right? The government has put a big pressure on universities to really up its game, and also in postgraduate space, which it wasn't doing before. So yeah, yep.
Yeah, I think that's a great, it's good to know that, because maybe not all of us are aware of that, especially if we're not in a teaching role or not at that course curriculum design level. Just knowing, okay, there are these pressures, and I noticed that there are also additional pressures, I guess, with the advent of AI and with some of the other advice coming out through TEXA around programmatic assessment in light of that, where some of, there may be other things going on as well in terms of redesigning whole courses. And that might also, and to have students show the process of work and maybe the skills that they're learning more, so that there's, other ways to demonstrate learning. So I think there were a couple of things that I'd love to come back to, but one question in the chat that we've got from Jack is, some cohorts are used to and are comfortable with self-reflection, but for some it's quite a foreign or uncomfortable concept, and how do we overcome that? So I'd love to hear, I guess, both in terms of, what are things that we might be considering in how we scaffold reflection, but also just, I guess, in light of all of these things around experiential learning and redesigning assessment, what can we be thinking, bringing in? Did you want me to nominate someone? Oh, Jason.
I'm happy
Jason,
happy to start. And hi, Jack. It's been a while since we've caught up. I think certainly the approach that we're taking with the reflections is that you do need some very structured instructions to get students started on it. So we use the deep model that I think RMIT developed, and that works pretty well. It's a very structured approach to reflective writing, and it's something that I like to use because it helps students to actually focus on their learning opportunities rather than just demonstrating how good they are. We try to, our students tend to be very natural at being able to talk about how good they are. We tell them, I don't care how good you are, I want to know what you're not good at and what you're going to do about it. So we do push their thinking through that and try to get that deeper level of reflection through that. So yeah, providing a structured framework, examples, and then we use a formative assessment before they submit the final assessment to be graded. So getting them just to write a short reflection that we then go through and give them extensive feedback on how well that actually aligns with the model, and and just really trying to push that thinking a little bit more. Part of that model is around planning, and that's often a very big weakness where they'll just make some very vague statements about improving their communication skills, and we go back and say, well, how are you going to do that, and when and why, and all those kind of questions. So yeah, so really that structured instructions, examples and feedback.
I add, oh, Heather, you go.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say that although some disciplines don't use the word reflection, like every discipline reflects, they just have different words to describe that. So I think it's finding what the language is from your discipline and using that. So for example, engineers don't like the word reflect, because I think they don't really get what it really means. So, but in engineers, within engineering, they have like their design cycle, right? Their design cycle is reflection. So that's the language you could use when you're getting students to respond. Get them to use that language and do that process. And again, that fits in again with what you're teaching them for, not just for this one placement, but for the whole way through the course to prepare them for their future, which is what they're going to have to do anyway. So yeah, that's it for me.
I'm going to add, and I love all of that too. It's really interesting for me to hear and to be hearing other people talk about this too. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one at La Trobe, but I try and link it back to context, because work integrated learning, or WIL in general, is all about context. Explain why you might use it, explain how you might use it. And I use the term in professional practice to students. And I also, and I'm very practical, I also link it to employability. So we start to look at reflection as part of, I always forget their names, Darst-Poole and Seward's employability model, and start to link it, well, how does reflection help you with your employability? And then how will reflection help you tell those stories that you will absolutely be using when you are looking for jobs and talking about how good you are and demonstrating those employability skills at job interviews and application forms. So a really, really context, I think. And like Jason said, lots of examples and choice around. Heather, I think you're saying that too. Give them some choice and structure and make it very practical. Really a reflective practice model is a set of questions. Let's just, it's really just helping us think through, gosh, what happened and how can we do it better?
That's a terrific point. And it probably segues quite nicely to another question that we've got in the chat from Natalie around, she mentions, designing Bachelor of Science units and scaffolding skills development towards WIL and capstone. And so the question is, how would you introduce scaffolding in first and second years? But I think at its core, it's also coming back to that broader programmatic development, and how do we really make all those pieces fit together and think about, building those opportunities across the course. So obviously first and second years is a key part of that, and probably the priority, but I would extend it out to a bit more broadly to think about, well, how do we do that more holistically as well? So I'm not sure if anybody
one of the whole of course workbooks I created was for Bachelor of Science students, and so what we did was we linked it directly to the course learning outcomes, and we gave students opportunities to first of all to find out what the course learning outcomes were, go find them, pop them into the workbook and see what skill related to that. And then just giving them explicit opportunities within units to say, okay, in this unit, we're looking at we're looking at lots of things, but you see the unit learning outcomes, you see this one's to do with that same skill. So what's one of your tasks that you're doing that's working on this skill, and get them to say, if it's about critical thinking, then it's like, oh yeah, we had to plan this, blah, 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 or we had to analyze this data. And so that they get the example from the unit at that level, so that whichever level, first year or second year or third year, and they explain what it is that they did and add some evidence to explain that. And then when they're going into the next year, then of course they've already know this stuff. So what's the next step from that? So that's why it's progressive over the course, and also helps them see their gaps. So maybe they've done tons and tons of stuff on communication or critical thinking, which often comes up in science, Maybe they haven't done very much on collaboration, or well, don't think they have, but they probably have, right, because of all their lab work. But maybe they think, well, this is something I really know that I need to work on, and then they can work towards. They can recognise this is what I need to make sure I absolutely focus on wherever they are during the course, and particularly on when they may have a little bit more opportunity, and they can talk to their supervisor about things that they want to make sure that they cover as well.
I've worked too, Heather, because the minor actually supports students. We see a lot of science, psychological science, arts, but less arts at this point, and business students coming in, and then a range of other smaller, more specialised degrees doing placements with us. But the science students who've done that, it's a first semester of second year. It's like a professional identity subject, Heather. I think, and Jason, I'm sure you're aware of these sorts of things. Those students really come into placement much more prepared. They have a sense of their career potential, career pathways. They have a sense of what industry's like, and they actually come in a little bit more engaged and organised around the placement experience. So definitely those subjects that promote that sort of employability in first and second year, and the courses that have those subjects at La Trobe, and there are some that don't. And I see that big difference. I won't go into different disciplines, but you really do see a big difference between those students that haven't had those first and second year type exploration around their employability and their careers and pathways and professions and identities. If they haven't had that, they really come into placement much less prepared. Yeah.
Such a great point. Did you want to add anything, Jason? No.
all very well covered by Heather and Rachel there.
On that note, it's probably a good chance to ask what in terms of what have you seen as been really effective in aligning those WIL activities to curriculum outcomes, or what's been, getting that curriculum design approach is often really tricky. It's really difficult to get teaching teams together, or getting a good sense and a view of what's happening across all of how those bits fit together. So, and I'm conscious that, the students always see that. Does it make sense? Especially Heather and Rachel, Heather, you mentioned getting students to do that work of identifying the learning outcomes. I guess, do you see gaps there, or is there, I guess, a gap when working with teaching teams to do that work? Or is it, what might, are there things in terms of how we do that and getting everybody together and getting that bigger picture that you could recommend? Yeah, Rachel looks like she's ready there. I think Rachel's pointing to you, Heather.
I was pointing to Jason. Jason looked like he was going to talk. The one thing I was going to say is I think it's really there's a need for, where I'm working across schools and across courses, and there's so many challenges there. I think there's a real need for strategy, and I guess I'm using my own context. There's really need for employability strategy around how do we get those teams working together, because the real uniqueness of the industry placement minor is the embedded career development learning, the fact that I've embedded, theory around employability and what that is, and starting to unpack that for students and linking that to graduate attributes and skills, and that employability not just being about their skills. So, there's a whole challenge and raft of challenges, in schools that might offer what I would term disciplinary-based work integrated learning subjects that just focus in their own specific discipline. Whereas I'm always talking about, Heather, you mentioned it earlier, that transferable skills. I'm talking about employability skills, teamwork, communication, and not a lot of other courses really talk to that level of those transferable skills that employers are actually looking for.
Yeah, I was, I guess, hesitating because I was trying to find the polite words to use, but I think WIL, and particularly kind of capstone type WIL experiences, pull everything together for the students despite the lack of programmatic design of our courses. So I think, there's so much that goes into a degree, and so many, majors and minors and electives that it is really challenging as an academic to know what is being taught to all of your students. So, and particularly for me, where I get students across the whole Bachelor of Commerce that they come from very different majors and they've got breadth subjects. So you can't necessarily assume a lot of common knowledge and skills that when they come into that, because they have had different experiences. So I think this is one of the great benefits of getting students out into the workplace, because then that's where they actually do get to see their learning come together and you know, joining some of those dots. Sometimes they, or actually probably a lot of cases, will see things are done very differently in industry to how they've been taught. You know, good and bad outcomes of that. But yeah, I think that's, like, it would be wonderful to have all of our degrees really carefully programmatically designed, but I think that's a huge task to be able to get to that level. But you know, these types of experiences can really help it.
Yeah, I was going to say that, like, really, this is the central issue. I think it's absolutely the crucial thing. If you just left students to the one unit coordinator or the couple of unit coordinators who are involved in placement to work all this stuff out, then that could easily be a big disaster. So making those connections the whole way through for staff as well as students is so important. You know, it's crucial. So even though it's hard, I think we have to, it just has to be done. And as I guess it's part of the course team, the course coordinator needs to be thinking about this and just making sure that the different elements are covered. It's like if they think about from, you know, the end of course or end of program, you know, what do you expect students to be able to do? And like, why do you need to do that? Like, what's that going to look like at different stages? Then just build the work experience into that. And of course, in some ways it's impossible because you don't know what experience the students are going to have. But you do know that they are going to have certain things that are going to link directly to that placement. So it's just making sure that they're prepared, and also prepared perhaps for the unexpected as well. Just you know, like, it's not like you can't scaffold it exactly, and I don't think we can try. We can set them up to have amazing experiences by giving them ownership of their own course and their own knowledge and experiences. Yeah.
One really good resource I thought of actually earlier when Heather was talking, Frederica Cater. Have people seen her resource? She's an ex-Deakin person, dare I say, and Leanne will know her. She did this fabulous piece on proximity and authenticity and examples of will. And if you haven't had a look at that, I think it's 2016 or 17, something like that. I'd so encourage everyone to have a look, because then you start to get a feel for the broadness of the will activity too. And maybe that talks to what Heather and Jason were also saying, that programmatic stuff, which I'm not as familiar with.
We might have to try and collect up some of these articles and send them around after the fact, or put them on our website. And I know there was the Goodwill Hunting one that used that. And that had Palmer, I think, as well as a couple other folks. So we'll try and collect up some of those articles. It's terrific to have those mentioned. I know Kashmira had a question around what are the potential benefits of sending regional students to cities and city students to regional that you've observed. And I guess on that note, what are the supports that they might need?
Oh, that is so interesting. I haven't seen anyone going from regional to city. I've only seen city to regional, which I guess makes sense. Most students are in the cities. It's amazing. You should hear them. Like, the students who are off on placement out in regional areas having these incredible experiences. It's amazing. And what they write in their reflection compared to what they're experiencing is so different. And so many of them come back, you know, at the end they're saying, I'm just trying to find ways I can stay here. You know, and I think it's like a mind-blowing experience for the students. So I've forgotten the second part of that question now.
I guess what support might they need?
Oh yeah,
you know, it could be quite you know, it's a shock sometimes.
It is a shock. It is a shock. And if they're like, lots of them are nursing students, they're okay. Well, the ones I've spoken to have been okay because there's a lot of support there, but I had a psychology student who was there completely by herself, you know. And interestingly, she was asked by her supervisor to work on the weekend. She said, "Oh, don't worry, you can make this up over the weekend." And she said, luckily, I think she's a mature age. She said, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'll wait till Monday," which of course the other students weren't able to do that. And what struck me about that was making sure students know their rights and their responsibilities and their rights before they go on placement, that they should know that it's not okay for them to be taken advantage of. Like, how many hours should they be doing, you know? What can they do if they run into difficulties? Like, you know, what are all those steps? And just make sure that's very clear and straightforward, and give them the permission to say no. They don't have to do anything that's asked of them, you know? Yeah. Oh, so the help is just make sure that they have it. I guess they have supervisors, but maybe they're not set up for regional, and maybe they're just not as prepared. So perhaps for those people who go, maybe just having examples from other students who have gone on placement. ASIN does collect all the reflections at the end, like they do a reflection at the end, so you can see them on the ASIN website under the case studies tab. It's on one of the clicks. Yeah, so go have a look, and that might be really good for anyone who is going on placement to get some sorts of ideas, but absolutely to make sure, if you do have students going in regionally, that there's strong support for them back at home. Yeah.
That, you know, maybe at your university you've heard of travel grants. We certainly have some travel grants. We have the inclusion funding the government gives, certainly around, I think we offer 1,000, 2,000 sort of employability grants, we call them, that support students with those costs around finding accommodation and travelling to and from, and then even, you know, things like even uniforms out of the sort of nursing space, even just, you know, that looking professional in whatever context that they're going into. And I think, you know, one of the things, the interview placement minor that I'm doing is that it's all online. So I think that gives some accessibility to the academic supervisor to have those regular consultations with students and check in. And I try and do that monitoring and support aspect, not only through the assessment and but also making time and being very explicit that there are weeks in our 6-week program where there are time for consultation, individual consultation, and being very, as an academic supervisor, being very accessible to students by email and getting there, like you said, Heather, when those problems do come up and the questions, you know, should I be working on the weekend? What are my hours of work? Do I include, you know, lunchtime in my placement hours? And those things are all very real questions that students have when they're new to the workplace and to their industry.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to ask just one kind of brief question because I'm conscious that we've only got 5 minutes left and we'll need to wrap up. But it has been such an amazing conversation, listening to all of your discussions and key points and the literature mentioned. I'm conscious we've only sort of scratched the surface and we may need to do some follow-ups at some point. I guess just as a last kind of closing point, it'd be great to know, and I know that Rachel, you mentioned like strategic leadership, which was a great point around how I guess either teams or institutions could be better supporting Will. So I guess it'd just be a good note to note either what would you love to see, you know, in the space in terms of you know, better strategic support or better support that learning designers could give, or opportunities in the way that we might leverage technology or other resources. Is there something that you would really love to see in the space that, you know, in the future, or things that you would love to see at that, you know, either at that leadership or institutional level? Maybe we'll start with Jason because we haven't talked a little bit.
The wish list is long. I think top of the list for me really is I guess looking at how we can scale up Will, and we've talked about the kind of the broad church, and I think that, you know, you've got to look at different ways. You've got to consider students' financial capacity to engage in some forms of will. I would certainly like to see more companies contributing financially to students undertaking placements, not in recognition that they're working, but in recognition that they're forgoing other employment to be able to undertake those. And really, if they paid them, then it gets around a whole lot of issues around vocational placement definitions anyway. So it makes life a lot easier if they just paid them. And I think the other is just really looking at those opportunities to embed will into courses at all levels of the program. So so that students are getting micro doses of it, I guess, throughout their whole program.
Thanks, Jason. Heather, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I just was going to suggest it's just like a relatively easy thing from a learning design perspective, which is comes back to the idea of isolation, which is in setting up will placements, if there's opportunities for students not just to work with the supervisor, but like have their own community of practice, so like discussion board or ways to ask questions from other students, and just encouraging students to engage with each other would be a nice way to deal with some of those issues that they might be facing.
Thanks, Heather. Rachel, do you?
The only thing I would say, and I think I've spent a lot of my life with students and then industry partners, but I think for students to actually understand the language we're using, so what is work integration learning, I think students are quicker to respond naturally to what's happening in the environment than unfortunately our institutions. And so for me, in the industry place, mine is the students that have found the minor first before actually the structures that are facilitating it into their courses. So I would love to see more campaigns going, this is what will means, this is work-based learning, what's all the language around it, and how do we support students to understand that?
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much, everyone. Can I get everyone in the chat or everyone who's joining us today to just, use your emojis or the chat to just give everyone, all our panelists, an applause today. Thank you so much. I'm conscious that there have been a couple things mentioned today that probably tie into some of the other things that the Learning Design SIG does or has done in the past, whether that's things like learning design hackathons, or last year we did a workshop with ePortfolios Australia around that programmatic design. So there might be some other resources as well as things that have come up today that we can keep bringing back into these conversations. So and I'll try and put something up on our website and send it out through our LinkedIn. But again, thank you so much to everybody. Next month, Keith, did you want to have a quick word about what's happening for next month?
Yeah, we're going to keep the panel thing going, Kate, because it was so successful this time. And we're actually talking about bridging the divide. So we've invited some corporate learning designers to come in and to share their thoughts about what people working in higher education might learn from the corporate sector and vice versa. So that'll be on the third Friday of the month for October at the same time, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Should be another great session.
Great, thank you so much. And as always, I'm joined by the lovely Kashmira, Leanne, Keith, who do probably lots more work than I do in making sure that these events run really smoothly. So thank you to my co-coordinators in the space, and thank you again to all our panelists today. I've come away with such a greater understanding of the challenges and also the opportunities, especially what I can do as a learning designer to really make that happen. So thank you again. I'm going to stop recording.